Back to order, please, and I'd like to ask board members to retake their seats. Okay. I think we now have time to give proper due to all of the rest of our agenda items. So why don't we go back to where we were, item 2.1, policies for prerequisites, core requisites, and advisories on recommended preparation. Vice Chancellor Barry Russell and our Academic Senate President Jane Patton, welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, President Himmelstein. This is the second reading for the regulation changes that were brought forward this last time. So what I wanted to do is just take a few minutes. I don't want to go through the whole presentation again, but I do want to take a few minutes to go through some of the information just to refresh your memories. And then I have some other data that I want to provide to give you a little bit of a background. So just where we are in the process, that we've had the notice of for public comment. The first reading, the public comment period ended. Second reading is where we are now. And then also in your board packet, you should have the comments, a summary of the comments with a summary of the recommended responses for those comments. And just to revisit again, is why should we intervene? Why should we get involved with this? And it is, the basis for doing this is to encourage student success. And I think everyone will agree that the measures of student success and the interventions of student success are many. This is not meant to solve all the problems. This is not meant to be the panacea for all the student success issues. But it is one thing that has been talked about for several years. So we're bringing this one forward at this point. In addition, on Wednesday, the Student Success Task Force is meeting Tuesday night and Wednesday, just a reminder. And as part of that day, we are focusing the whole conversation on student success in academic preparation and basic skills preparation. So we're going to be leading the conversation of the task force in more of the broader, bigger initiatives that have taken place in the state, as well as getting some ideas and recommendations from the task force about what the state should be doing and moving forward on those issues. So this is being done not solely and myopically in one area. We are looking at the big picture. This just happens to be one of the one small change that we would like to make in our big process. To go over this, just quickly again, the current conditions for establishing prerequisites are and we're not changing any of these. They remain intact, where the statistical validation is one of the choices, one of the ways in which prerequisites and co-requisites can be established. And then what we are adding to this list is a plan produced by the local districts that would include content review and subsequent research and study to follow. And then this list again shows that there is work being done across the state. The Academic Senate has done a great deal of work in the areas of improving basic skills and providing guidance to curriculum committees and campuses on how to establish content review, how to go through that process, and provide professional development for faculty. We also have other professional development activities going on in the state and other successful programs, just a few listed here. So the important thing to understand, I think, and I'm kind of referring to some of the comments that came back, we often got the comment that there should not be a method of establishing prerequisites and co-requisites with content review alone. To step back to the original changes that were proposed over a year ago, that was pretty much the language at that point, was that we wanted to allow content review. We heard those messages that people didn't want the language to say content review alone. They wanted some specific oversight. They wanted some specific language that gave a little more direction about that. And so we did change the language. It's gone through quite a few changes. The task force has worked very hard in listening to the comments from all the constituencies and has put in what we think are good safeguards to make sure that campuses aren't just doing this on a whim, that they are actually doing it through a thoughtful process of planning across the campus, followed by a curriculum process known as content review, and then that's followed by oversight and approval by the administration and the local boards. Okay, so one thing that I wanted to do is to provide you another example, and obviously this slide on here is just to put up there to ask you to turn to the handout that I've provided to you. And in that handout, I just wanted to step through again what this process might look like on a campus and why this is not content review alone. In fact, the discussions that the campuses would have, and Jane can speak to this maybe a little more deeply, is not only focused on the two courses in just a content review, which might just lead someone to believe that you read the course descriptions of the two courses and then establish if there's some sort of reason for a prerequisite. It goes much, much deeper than that. And so I wanted to provide you this data. This college provided me this data recently, and once again, we do not have this data on a statewide level. In fact, it would be fairly meaningless on a statewide level because of the 112 different characteristics that we have out there across the state. There would be no way for us to know what kinds of changes are being made across 2.9 million students. Wouldn't be effective to have statewide data. So what we're trying to do is provide examples of what local data looks like and what local decision makers would see. So they would see a printout like this, and this campus did a research project that included quite a few courses. I think over 700 courses were looked at. There were a lot of students over a period of years that were looked at to determine if there was some way to identify which courses might have some level of lack of student success that would then provide them a list of courses that would need to be looked at further. In this group of 700 courses, I've just provided you the first page. This is a spreadsheet that goes on pages and pages and pages. I didn't want to kill a lot of trees because I think you can get the information off this first one. And this first page, over on the far right, you see all the yeses down the column. It just happens to be, this was the first page, and they ordered the courses in an order of all the yeses first. There were pages and pages that said no, that those courses did not meet their standards of needing to be looked at further, that there were either too many too few students in the courses to make some statistical judgment, or the courses weren't offered evenly enough. There were lots of other issues. But they did a thoughtful process of establishing at least the first baseline data to go through to establish if a course needed to go through content review. So what a campus would do at this point, in our recommendation, would be to then establish a committee, a discipline-specific committee between the two disciplines involved. In this case, this is an English course, so someone from the English department and then representatives from whatever the course department was, to have a discussion about the many things that might affect student success between those two disciplines. Because it may be a simple discussion of that the reading level of the course, of the book, the textbook, is too high. The reading level that the faculty member in the subject matter may have chosen may be at a level that is affecting student success. And after a discussion with the reading faculty or the English faculty, they may discover that and say, you know what, I could probably choose a different textbook that might be more accessible to students. So let's try that intervention first before we put a prerequisite. And so the faculty are having a discussion. They could be looking at things like the course assignments, which are necessary in the course outline of record, to give an example of assignments. And in a discussion with the English faculty, they may say, you know, the way that you've structured these assignments may be inappropriate for the level of students you're getting. Let me help you design this in a different way. So there may be other interventions that happen besides prerequisites. Once they've gone through all of those things and they had the discussion, they may actually come up with a recommendation that a prerequisite is necessary. Now, one of the positive things I think about this regulation that's important to notice is that although it's typified as a prerequisite-co-requisite discussion, it really is a focus on content review. It's a focus on getting the two disciplines together, which, if you look at the original statistical validation only, really requires no discussion between the two areas to have that happen. It can be done totally in an office of an institutional researcher who takes the data and mashes it all together. It may be a very poor predictor of what's really happening, but the data says it, so let's put it in place. So I guess my supposition is that there's the position of statistical validation only is no better a choice necessarily than content review, and that local campuses need to be able to have the ability to make that choice and to come up with what fits their campus best and their campus processes. And as we've said over and over again, this is a permissive process. It's not one that we are mandating from the state level that they should do. And so we feel like in the regulations that we have gone through all of the elements that have come through with the comments for improvement. We have provided enough oversight in the process. As you can see, the Chancellor's Office will provide oversight for what goes on. And another thing about oversight that I didn't mention last time that did come up as we were discussing some of these the comments that you have in front of you, is that what happens after this regulation is approved here at the Board of Governors meeting is that the staff then goes through a process of developing guidelines. And those are most often done through the program course approval handbook, which we refer to as the PACA. And that document does come to you for approval as well. So in that document, you will be able to see how we have provided information to the districts on what we feel are some of the best ways to review this, so that we can make sure that campuses are following through, that the plans that are being developed are developed up to a certain standard, that the way content review is done to a certain standard, so we can put those in the guidelines that we develop as a staff. And then the follow-up of having courses reported every year will be done through a systematic process. We now have an online curriculum inventory that we haven't had in the past. It will have an element where we'll be able to identify which courses have prerequisites, which ones were established in the last year, so that if we see that there are a large number of those courses being done, we can step in and investigate further about why those courses, why there might be so many. There could be a good reason, or there may be no reason, or there could be a bad reason. But we would just need to identify more from there. So with that, I think we are kind of at the point where the regulations are there. You have the comments. I hope those were helpful, that we did pull together all the written comments that we received, as well as all the verbal comments that were received at the hearing, the public hearing in January, and then we provided our responses to those.
Board member discussion. Member Reed.
I certainly appreciate the work that the Faculty Senate and all has done on this. I guess I have a couple questions and then a personal observation. The permissiveness of the regulation somehow bothers me, that it isn't mandated by all the districts, and how we can measure that success if all the districts aren't required to participate. And maybe, Barry, maybe you could answer that, or Chancellor Scott, and why we've taken an approach that's a permissive one where they can opt out if they choose not to. And then the other question I have, it corresponds with that, in that I personally support a prerequisite, but at the same time, I'm concerned about the budget. When we haven't yet determined, the districts don't know what the budgeting cycle is going to be like, that it might be not to implement this, but to wait until after we have a formal budget, so that districts know where they stand financially, because this certainly is going to cost districts money to implement. So could you address those two issues?
Sure. The permissive nature, I think, kind of goes back to what the Chancellor was alluding to earlier, is that we do have 72 individual districts who have the responsibility of overseeing this. And I think it would be inappropriate, actually, for us to step in and mandate something across the state, that it would be a permissive nature to allow the campuses, the districts, to decide on their own basis whether this is an appropriate change or not. Their statistical validation process may be working just fine for them at this point, in the way that they have things going. There are some districts, and obviously this didn't come out of a vacuum. This came from a call, a resolution of the Academic Senate, a study group with the plan for the state.
Action planning group. For
Action
the
planning group.
strategic plan.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you. For the strategic plan. So it came forward from the field that we need another way of doing this available to us. And so the permissive language is there in that we don't want to be mandating that all colleges have to do this, because, and you're right, because the next item is that it does involve a budget implication. And that's why in the planning process, the budget implication has to be covered. If they're going to move this direction, they would have to identify that they have enough prerequisite courses, that they have enough transfer courses otherwise to be able to help students get to their goals. And so it's important for them to have that plan in place. The other thing is that we're hoping, I think, that the current budget situation gets better in the next few years. I feel like that if this regulation goes into effect, it would be probably more than a year before a campus could actually even get a plan together and forwarded and in place. Therefore, it would be another year before curriculum committees could actually start establishing prerequisites. So it's probably 2 or 3 years down the path before this will actually impact prerequisites and co-requisites on courses. And by that time, I wouldn't want to wait until then to make if that's the better budget time, I wouldn't want to make the change then. This would put us ahead of the game of getting everything in place as we move forward.
I'd like to add a statement to that. The faculty actually discussed in the early stages, should we require that every transfer level course should first require students to complete remediation. And there are a lot of places that have that requirement, but the thought was that that was too strong and too wide sweeping, and it would be better to choose those classes where the students are really failing and really not succeeding, and start with those in a more gradual fashion. And so the suggestion that you're making, Member Reed, is absolutely a valid one, because many places do require every transfer class to have prerequisites, but we felt it was better to take a more gradual, softer stance.
I would like to comment on the budget part of it. Remember that in the faculty duties, one of the faculty duties is curriculum, is the development of curriculum, is the serving on curriculum committees. So this really is not going to be terribly expensive. Now, occasionally there is such a change in curriculum that some campuses choose to give some faculty release time to develop a curriculum. But in most cases, that's just part of the faculty's duty. And so when somebody, for instance, develops a new course, they don't get any extra pay for that. When they serve on the curriculum committee, they don't get any extra pay for that. I mean, that's considered part of their duties. So I don't see that this is going to be heavily expensive in terms of, I mean, and it would be, once again, it would be we want this to be a local decision to be made. And that's why we made it permissive, because presently, the local college can't make this decision. That's one of the problems here. We ruled them out and said they can't do it. And this is something that's come up through the faculty. You know, I've received letter after letter from faculty that wants to say, this is something we desperately need. And when you see some of these analysis of the course, and you see that someone who doesn't have the reading ability or the English ability, and maybe the success rate at the top one, they're 18.2%. Well, that means 4 out of 5 of the people who attempted it failed. Yeah. Well, that's not a very good thing. You know, you might want to look at that course and say, either we need to change the course or we need to put a prerequisite in here, because too many students are failing. And, you know, the biggest criticism that we're getting of the community colleges today is we don't have enough success. We have a lot of access, but not enough success. And I think this was an attempt on the part of the Academic Senate to say, you know, there are ways in which we can improve the success rate, and one is to make sure on some courses, not all courses, but on some courses, that students who are not adequately prepared first get adequately prepared before they take the course, because it's an awfully defeating proposition when, say, only 20% of the students who don't have this kind of English ability are able to pass the course.
Member Reed, were you through, or did you have follow-up?
Now, I have some other comments, but I'd rather wait.
Okay, Member Baca, then Member McDonald.
We've been working on this for probably the better part of the past year, and I know the Senate's been working on this even longer than that, and has done a very good job of trying to look at all the issues that that are impacting on this and affecting it. And as Chancellor just finished saying, this is a matter of trying to maintain access and yet be successful. So it's really a tug back and forth. Now, the permissive nature of this allows for the local districts to weigh those two things, I believe. And so we need to move in a direction where students recognize better what it is they need to do in order to be successful. Now, this isn't something that, as it's been drafted by the Senate, proposed by the Senate, is a sweeping kind of regulatory change, but it's something that can help local colleges more effectively convey to students what they need to do in order to be successful in certain classes. So I think they've done a very good job of trying to balance those competing issues of success and really aimed at success, because that's, I mean, the bottom line, we need to have more students be successful in the coursework. And so, you know, I think they've done a very good job of balancing those two things. And, you know, I think what we're voting on here today is something I think that we should support.
Member McDonald.
You know, I've been having some difficulties because when I was in school at L.A. Harbor, I had to take some prerequisites. So I understand prerequisites. However, I've been receiving a lot of phone calls and emails from the Black, the Brown, and Asian communities that are not happy with this because it feels that, especially in the Black community and the Brown community, that because of the graduation rates, and this is going to hurt students getting their education. And the numbers are really, really low, especially in the African American or Black community. But on the other hand, when I was going through all this and I'm looking for it, I really didn't see a compromise. I didn't see, everyone's pretty much had a line in the sand. It's either this way or that way. I was encouraged by the second slide that you had up there that had a 2-year pilot program. So in other words, you're saying any one of the, I guess you're mentioning or meaning that any campus that or district that decides to put one of these programs together or go with the prerequisites or co-requisites would have to have a 2-year pilot. Is right there. See, new courses, 2-year pilot available. Because I was going to suggest, I was going to say, why don't we take a look at possibly doing a pilot for in certain districts, so we can really have the data and look at some of the ethnic community campuses that we have and put something together. I'm just looking for a compromise. So I wanted to throw that out. And that's why I saw that, and that's why I came back to it, because that makes sense if we're going to do a pilot available. And I think that kind of meets the requirements that the people in the community are looking for, at least from the phone calls I'm getting, because that lets you know that you're making an effort to take a look at it and you can make changes. That's just my comments.
Member Azum, do you want to respond?
Well, I wanted to say one thing, and I'm sure the Vice Chancellor would as well. The courses are already requirements that were prerequisite courses are already required for graduation. In order to graduate and get an associate degree or transfer in any California community college, you must complete successfully English 1A, English composition, and the mathematics intermediate algebra. The courses that would be added as prerequisites would be either those courses or, in more cases, actually one level below that. So it's really only a matter of the sequencing of when you take the classes. In other words, rather than in your first semester going into a course that's really over your head, save that one for the second year that you're at the college and first take the English and math that are already required. So there's no additional requirement being put on students. It's just when they take it.
Then help me understand the new courses 2-year pilot available piece there.
Right,
I'm missing something in here.
Okay, that particular piece, and that's in the current process. That current piece allows, when a brand-new course is introduced on campus, then they have the option at the time that the course is introduced to, and they want to put a prerequisite, they can establish the prerequisite and run a 2-year pilot to determine if there are any ill effects to that prerequisite. But existing courses don't. You can't do that. Existing courses, you have to go through the long statistical validation. So there is already a mechanism for brand new courses that are coming in, and many programs do choose that option of establishing it right up front and then running the data afterwards. So in some ways, what we're trying to do with this permissive option is allow that sort of process to happen as well with the existing courses that are there.
Member Izumi, then Member Barreras.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Vice Chancellor Russell, the Academic Senate, for putting all of this material together and going through this long process. And I think I especially want to thank, people who are on both sides of the issue who have given their input. And I commend, Vice Chancellor Russell and the Academic Senate for going through this whole listening process to, hear what both sides of the debate have to say about it, and trying to respond and incorporate where it's possible, the input and suggestions from people who are very interested in this. So I want to commend everybody on that. I just wanted to say that in terms of all the statements that were put together that you laboriously put together in the appendix for us, and I read through them. I actually just want to point out the one that, they were all very good and had a lot of good points, but the one that to me just kind of impacted me personally was actually the comments of, relatively short comments here, actually though, from Mark Valenzuela from the Student Senate. And, we have the views of the people, the adults in the system, but I thought it was interesting to read Mark's comments about, his own particular experience in a particular class, and about how prerequisites could have, helped the people, and, go to the point that Member Baca made about improving student success, and in how in that particular class had this change been in place previously, that might have improved the success of the students in his classroom. And I thought that that was very interesting to read, because you get the student level view of things, and ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is to try and improve the success of those students. So I'm supportive of this particular measure.
Member Barreras.
Yes, I too want to thank the staff and Academic Senate for the hard work that you've done, and I'm very considerate of that. But I guess my concerns kind of still go back to support services, and from a community college perspective as a student, if we're going to depend on students to take the courses in the form of sequencing them and take them at a time that they can and they're prepared for it, that's going to be dependent upon the student. Now, we know from my experience that some of these students do not seek counseling services. A lot of the colleges are already impacted by not having the enough services to provide to the students because of budget cuts and so forth. So a lot of the students just take the classes, sign up for whatever they think they feel, and then they start taking classes through that, and they feel they're ready to transfer or whatever. But so that worries me, that they're not, in order to ensure that each student do take these classes in a sequenced manner, they would have to see a counselor to get that guidance, and we know that they all don't. So how are we going to ensure that that's going to happen? Now, from a local trustee, from a perspective level, in terms of budget impact, if my Academic Senate was to come forward to the board and say we want to implement these courses, we don't have the budget, we're already we're cutting so many classes, we're down to the core. I don't know how, as a member, I would be able to support that and be able to budget for my college and able to support such actions. Not that I wouldn't support, because I know that we need to do everything that we can in order to move our students forward and transfer them. But as a trustee, that would be really, really hard for me to make that hard decision on what to approve and what not to. So that's, I know that is permissive, that we can do it at the same time, but those discussions will happen, and that will create some type of, I don't know. So in a sense, I guess if we do this, I would support something like the two-year pilot if we were to do it out by regions and see what type of budget impact that would cause in community colleges. That would give us a better picture as to what to expect if a lot of other districts were to go and do that and implement that. So I think those are still concerns with me in terms of support services. We've cut so much, and our students, don't have that availability. So in terms of guidance for them to be on that correct path, that's a tough issue.
Other board member comments? Member Haley?
We've been at this for quite a while, and I think many of us on the board, certainly the staff and certainly the people out in the districts, have been working on this from the beginning, when we set it up was part of the strategic plan, and one of the major things that we wanted to have done. I'm proud to see so many of our people come together and with different points of view and keep listening and keep adjusting. And I think we've done the staff and the people at all of the different colleges that have been part of this, and the Senate and all the people that are paying attention to it, the students and the chief executive officers. Everybody's been really paying attention to this. And I really think it's time to move. I'm very supportive of where we are now. I think we've gotten here with extreme deliberation, and I'm very supportive of it, and I'd like to suggest that we move forward.
Okay. Member Thomas.
Yes, I would also like to join with my colleagues in thanking those that have put so much effort in on both sides of the argument to help us understand the issues from their perspectives and help us to make an intelligent decision. I think we're all very concerned about student success for all of our students. We can't afford, in lots of ways, for our students not to be successful. And I listened to what Jane Patton said about timing, and my question is, if this method of prerequisite establishment is adopted by a college and is in fact in place, would that that would necessitate the appropriate prerequisite levels before entering into certain coursework, is in fact there potential for students to have fewer failed attempts, and therefore actually those students that we're concerned about that might, whether they be students of color or any of our students, if they have fewer failed attempts, is in fact the potential for more completion, more success down the road. I share Member Barrera's concern about being able to provide the guidance to students in order to navigate that, but do you see a potential for fewer failed attempts?
Absolutely. I think that is one of the outcomes that we will see. If a student can take a class once and pass it, I think we all think that's better than dropping, failing. And in these times when we're turning away so many thousands of students, if a student takes the class in the order with the skills to succeed the first time, and again, remember these are classes they have to take anyway, I think there will be a benefit, and students won't be demoralized with textbooks that they can't read and assignments that they can't complete. They will walk in feeling very confident that they have what it takes to succeed in the class.
Any other? Member Davis-Lyman?
Yes, I'd like to thank all the people who have attended these meetings and have shared with us, not only from their heads, but their hearts and their souls. And including the starting, I remember when this started with the Academic Senate and the resolution that was passed. no matter which side, and I think there are many sides, I don't think there are just two sides to this issue, I think all of us care deeply about our students, and we want them to succeed, not only in their classes, but in life in general. I just have a question. Actually, today, when we received the budget report and the LAO, the draconian budget, right up at the top is the big cut in basic skills. And I also share a concern that that to be successful, our students have to be able to read textbooks and that kind of thing. And that if those classes aren't there, our students can't afford to come to an 8 o'clock class, and then maybe the basic skills class is available at 2 o'clock. They can't get into the others for multiple reasons. They can't hang around a campus waiting or go back and forth. And so my concern is, will those classes be there? Now, I know that we're not saying that every class is going to have a prerequisite. Only the classes that district or that college decides needs to have a prerequisite in order for students to succeed. Am I correct about that? That only it's locally determined and there would be some statistical data available to say 40% of the students do not pass this class or whatever it is. Is that right, James?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. The example that I've given you with just the first page, out of the 700 courses, I think they identified 100 potential that had yes on the right side. And that college has no intention of putting 100 prerequisites that it would be unmanageable. There's no way that they could follow up with having all the courses. And that goes back to, I think, Member Barreras' concern is that goes back to the plan that has to be developed on the local level. And the local boards would know about that plan and know what the college is planning to do if they do establish these prerequisites. They would know that what are they going to do with counseling? And that's one of the things we're struggling with the Student Success Task Force is the amount of counseling. The fact of the matter is now that students self-counsel themselves on bad information because they look at a course, it has no prerequisite listed, it has no indication that there's a danger there, and so they sign themselves into it. They may even see a counselor, and the counselor helps them get into that course because there is no prerequisite. So what we're trying to do is to really have a strong intervention that at least on some courses that are going to be a big problem for students, to at least put up some sort of marker that warns them. You need to get your courses in sequence, and it's not going back to Jane's comment, it's not telling them they can't take the courses. It's saying, we need you to take them in this order. One of the things that we learned, one of the phrases we're learning in the Student Success Task Force discussion is that students don't do optional. That they need a clear pathway. They need to be told, do it this way to make yourself successful. And so this is part of that process, is let's get this in order. Don't take them this way, because when you do that, the statistics show that 18% of the students succeed. We want you to be in a better place, so let's flip those around and take them in the right order so that you'll be part of the other crowd that has more potential for success.
Thank you.
We'll have Member Reed, did you want to?
Jane, I have to, in my mind, because I tend to represent rural community colleges, are we somehow going to be put at a disadvantage because we don't have as many course offerings and the like? Would those schools be less likely to adopt this prerequisite program and therefore create in the long term a disparity between the haves and have-nots because they don't have the necessary curriculum to meet these prerequisites and the like?
It's very hard for me to predict how things would play out in that case. I would trust the wisdom of the local boards, the local college presidents and vice presidents, curriculum committees, and department faculty to make the determination that's right for their students locally. And if they see that there's a handful of classes where students are failing, no matter whether they're in a rural or urban area, I would think they would want to give the students the best information possible and align their curriculum as much as possible with others. So I don't know exactly how it will play out. I wouldn't be surprised that when we look at SB 1440, the transfer degree, and I was delighted that the governor knew about that and that the chancellor pointed out how we're trying to align the curriculum. Those conversations where we're bringing together the CSU faculty and the community college faculty to look at the top 20 majors and say what preparation do the students need at lower division in order to get into the CSU and succeed in upper division. They are learning from those conversations, and we as community college faculty learn from our colleagues at CSU. They learn from us, and we end up with a much more aligned curriculum. So I would say that occurring at the same time as our Student Success Task Force from 1143, all of these things coming together, I think will lead to us doing a better job at teaching and students doing a better job of succeeding.
Chancellor Scott.
Okay, I know we're going to continue this discussion, and that's fine. I want to state, and I would like to recommend the passage of this particular item, and let me tell you why I am recommending the passage, and of course the board will make the decision, not myself. Number one, we are unique. There's no other state that that says, in effect, you've got to go through a statistical validation. Content review is pretty typical of the nation, of university faculties, whomever. We have chosen not to give that ability to the local college. And the fact that we've made this totally permissive, in other words, if at any college there's a sufficient number of people who believe that this won't work, they will make that a plea before the curriculum committee and before the board of trustees. So remember that one of the beauties of this is right now the colleges can't do this. And we're giving them the permission now to do this if they would. Number three, the Academic Senate has taken a lot of amendments. They have said, okay, we're going to make sure these safeguards exist, and they go through it. And they've taken those amendments because of the concerns expressed. And number four, I must tell you that all the constituencies of the community college are behind this. The Academic Senate, the CEO board approved it, the trustees approved it, the Student Senate approved it. So we don't have a group within the community colleges that are opposed to this. Oh, I'm not saying there's nobody in the community colleges that doesn't oppose it. There are. But I'm saying that all the constituencies that I know of have approved it. So if we decide not to approve it, we're saying, in effect, regardless of your recommendations, and, you know, I don't think the Academic Senate is infallible, but in my experience as a college president, I listened pretty carefully to the faculty on issues that had to do with curriculum, because after all, they've studied. So we have a lot of the faculty that are saying, unfortunately, there are certain courses here that when students enroll in this course, they just don't succeed, or they don't succeed in high numbers. Now, the question has been raised, well, maybe we don't have enough courses. Well, that's what a college ought to do. It ought to, and you know, whether it's a rural college or whatever, it ought to have enough courses here, and that's one of the questions I believe that's going to be asked whenever this is proposed. But the point is, now we're saying because we don't have enough courses, we let them enroll in courses in which they fail. I don't think that's a very good approach, frankly. I say, well, you know, let's really address and talk about having the number of basic skill courses that are necessary. But our present solution is to say, sorry, we don't have enough basic skills, so you go on and take that history of Western civilization, although you're 2 levels below the English reading level, and then the poor student fails. So right now, the chief criticism that's leveled against community colleges that I hear is that we don't have a sufficient degree of success. We have a lot of access, but not a degree of success. And that's what the Student Success Task Force is all about. But the Student Success Task Force is not put in motion and to say nothing that's of value can be done before we get through. After all, we passed the transfer bill last year before the Student Success Task Force met because it was a pretty good idea. It was a good idea for student success. This appears to be a good idea for student success. It's not mandated, it's simply permissive. It's backed by all the constituencies in the community college. It is something that has been thought through, and the concerns that have been expressed, there have been changes that have been made, real safeguards. I think Vice Chancellor Russell was right. If this goes into effect, if you think suddenly there's going to be 1,000 courses that are suddenly going to have a prerequisite, that's not going to happen because they have to go through certain steps. And there are going to be faculty that say, you know, I don't want a prerequisite because if I have a prerequisite, I won't have anybody enrolling in my course. So there's going to be plenty of discussion about this. And if you feel on the local level, if you feel your college is not ready to accept this, then you can vote, you can simply turn it down. It's not required of you. But that's the reason that after all of this discussion, I think this makes sense, and that's the reason I made the statement.
Member Price, then Member Azumi, and Member Haley.
Well, I'm in support of this, and if there weren't any more discussion, I was going to move to adopt the proposed regulations.
I second it.
Okay, Member Azumi?
We still have.
Well, we can,
still have public
yeah, we still have
We still
public
have public
comment. We can take the motion and have public comment. I would just say for myself as a member of this board, I'm also very appreciative of all of the work that's been done, and I am very mindful and respectful of the comments of Member McDonald and Member Barreras. But on this particular issue, I am going to have a hard time not listening to the students, CEOs, faculty, and trustees in their recommendation. So I am certainly supportive of them on this issue. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the Vice President for public comment.
Juan Cepeda from Los Amigos of Orange County.
Good morning, President Himmelstein, members of the board, Chancellor Scott, staff in the audience. I'm Juan Cepeda, and I'm a member of Los Amigos of Orange County, and I'm here to present the following statements for the record and in opposition to this proposition. Los Amigos of Orange County has concluded that the Academic Senate advocacy for student success is only a justification for marketing the requisites and prerequisites policy change. All along, the hidden goal has been to gain political control and autonomy in the local academic arena. 3 points bear this conclusion. 1, the proposed abrogation of the out-of-court agreement, the Maldiv case, never honored, much less implemented, has been employed to introduce the Academic Senate's content review, key factor in regaining full autonomy and the supremacy of the classroom and the local academics. It renders null and void any inputs of tempering ability from academic deans, vice presidents, presidents, and consequently local boards. For this Board of Governors to seriously consider policy changes that will undermine authority of locally elected boards of trustees, and even removing AB 17's 25 role in this area through regulations is quite telling of the Sacramento politics brought to bear by the Academic Senate. Number two, substantial opposition has been raised to the Academic Senate's proposed Title V policy changes. The recommendations for this proposed policy changes is a classical case of self-serving insider dealing between the Academic Senate and the Chancellor's office. For not one reference of reliable data that shows student success has been offered by the Academic Senate, but the opposite, innuendo, unsubstantiated propositions, and academic economic fear-mongering. The Academic Senate's simplistic proposal of requisites and prerequisites has been proven to be an economic wasteland by community college experts and national renowned research and their data outcomes. Number three, recommendations that matriculation and current categorical programs carry the burden for securing success of this Academic Senate proposal policy. It's not credible. The programs have lost 50% of their funding in the last 2 years. Beyond this, it's an ill-conceived idea since it hides unknown cost factors, not identified by the Academic Senate nor quantified by the Chancellor's office. It's a trifecta, in a sense, for the Academic Senate. Content review nullifies the local academic administrators, channeling resources from matriculation, funds more classes in prerequisites. Title V changes, disbalances AB 1725 and local boards' authority. Recommendations. Los Amigos of Orange County strongly urge you to not approve the Academic Senate-sponsored recommendation. We recommend that the BOG direct its Title V changes to the Student Success Task Force, SB 1143, where mature administrators can provide you a different perspective from the administrative side. You have heard from the academic side, hear from the other side.
Mr. Cepeda.
Finally, we recommend that the BOG maintain the integrity and balance of authority in AB 1725 by not amending Title V regulations. We thank you for the opportunity to speak and to present these ideas before you.
Thank you. Mark Valenzuela, Student Senate.
Well, I don't have much knowledge on the data, but what I have seen is that we're worried about trapping students in a cycle that they can't get out of. And I think we're already doing that by not having prerequisites in place. Right now, we say we're turning students away, and we're not really turning students away. They're just not able to get into classes that they need. And so I think that this prerequisite item and the changes to Title V will allow our students to be more successful by allowing them to get classes that they are prepared for. With it being so hard to get into a class right now, I think we need to make sure that we have successful students getting into those classes. We're turning all these students away, and then we have students getting into classes that they cannot be successful in. I think we need to take care of the students that can be successful and help other students that aren't able to be successful reach their full potential by going through the prerequisites and by moving up the ladder to what they need to take. And so in order to promote student success, I think this is a great item that will allow more students to be successful and more students to move through our system the way it was designed to. Thank you.
Rita Mies? From Community College League.
Good afternoon. Board President Himmelstein, Chancellor Scott, and members of the board. My name is Rita Mize. I'm the Director of Policy for Community College League, and I'm here to affirm that both the trustees and the CEO boards of the league have endorsed this proposal of the Academic Senate. We believe this is an academic and a professional matter, and we see no legal, fiscal, or organizational reasons for opposing it. Our boards are also very pleased to see that the Senate has encouraged cautious implementation and regular evaluation to avoid disproportionate impact. Thank you.
Ian Walton, Mission College.
Board, colleagues, good afternoon. I'm Ian Walton. I'm a math instructor at Mission College, and I'm one of the legion of past presidents of the Academic Senate. So it's nice to see many of you again. I support this change. I urge you to approve it today. And what I want to bring to you in my 3 minutes is some of the political history on this issue rather than the specific content. Several years ago, when you created the System Strategic Plan, you embarked on a mission to improve student success in our colleges, and more importantly, in the real world. And you examined a lot of components of our system from entry to college all the way through graduation. You've seen lots of documents and heard that many of our students drop or they fail courses because they don't have the skills necessary to succeed. I would suggest to you that putting students in that position is cruel and unusual punishment. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help the colleges. It wastes resources. We can do better than that. Prerequisites are the tool for doing better than that. They're the tool for ensuring that students are placed in classes where they have a chance to succeed. They're not a random, thoughtless, unnecessary barrier. So you've been in this rather uncomfortable position before when you implemented changes to the associate degree requirements. You had well-meaning, passionate individuals asking you not to create a barrier. But you had all the official representatives of the system constituents, including the students, urging you to make the changes. Sound familiar? Just like today. You did the right thing back then. You made the changes, and incidentally, you created the Basic Skills Initiative as a support system. If you had not done that, we, at this point, would be foolishly out of step with the National Common Core Standards. So I urge you, make this change today, give colleges the opportunity to put us in alignment with national standards on prerequisites. If you do that, you'll be greatly increasing the chances that our students and our colleges will succeed. And as a side effect, you might save some taxpayer dollars for Governor Brown. Thank you.
Dr. Christine Miller from California State University, Sacramento.
Thank you. I speak in support of this item, and there's a simple mnemonic that serves as the frame of my support: process, access, success. In terms of process, the plan for content review of prerequisites seems fundamentally sound. There are appropriate levels of review from the faculty level all the way up to the system level, and its permissive option in terms of data requirements preserves the flexibility and the autonomy of campuses. We in the CSU trust the California Community College's curricular review processes, and if faculty present a reasonable argument for a prerequisite, we would trust that too. The process is sound. In terms of access, some assert underrepresented minority students would be disproportionately impacted if more prerequisites were instituted. But the addition of appropriate prerequisites is not an insurmountable hurdle. To the contrary, it's a leg up for success. Here's the key. Those who argue access will suffer assume a rampant expansion of new prerequisites. But this assumption seems unwarranted. Think about it. Why would faculty bar students from their classes without good reason? It's counterproductive because it could destroy their own program. So there's no reason to think there will be a proliferation of prerequisites that will diminish access. Instead, there's every reason to think that there will be thoughtful prerequisites that will enhance success for underrepresented students. So that brings me to the final reason I support the proposed changes: student success. The argument here is intuitively obvious. Prerequisites help students succeed because they're prepared to engage in an appropriate level of study. Allowing students to take courses they aren't prepared for leads, in the words of the UC and CSU Senate chairs, not only to failure in a single course, but failure in a higher education endeavor, and sometimes even to a failure mentality in all future endeavors. So having addressed this triumvirate of process, access, and success, I'd like to say one more thing about the relationship between access and success. The responsibility to provide access carries with it the responsibility to provide pathways to success. This access-success dynamic is crucial. Access without success is wasted effort on the part of the students and systems of higher education. The proposal before you establishes, 1, a sound process for content review of prerequisites, 2, it's sensitive to access issues, and 3, it has as its prime directive the aim of promoting student success. And I urge you to support it.
Thank you. Jeanette Zapatin from the Mexican American League Defense and Education Fund.
Good afternoon, Chancellor Scott and President Himmelstein. I represent the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and unfortunately, we are still opposed to the Title V policy changes. Although we wholeheartedly support continuing to promulgate and promote policies that would enhance student success and student achievement, we feel that the policy change as drafted still fails to address some key concerns that MALDF has raised over the past several months. One of the largest concerns that we have, of course, is how this policy change will have a disparate impact on students of color and students who are English language learners. We still feel that the language as written does not provide sufficient guidelines to address the disparate impact, and we feel that safeguards that are adequate and meaningful continue to be needed in this arena. We also believe that it is critical for these for this policy change to also include a package of reforms, whether that be the counseling piece and ensuring that also that there are classes available, that the basic skill classes are available for our students, because what we don't want is to have students now have a layer of prerequisites and then not have access to those courses that will now be required. So we really feel that this should be packaged in a way to ensure that not only students can succeed, but they also have access to those prerequisite courses. And you know, I do want to say that we have been thankful that you have taken into consideration all the different perspectives and views, and that MALDF continues to be interested to be at the table and to continue working with all of you to ensure that our students do succeed. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Will Bruce, I think it's EOPS.
Hi, my name is Will Bruce, EOPS Association President, Chancellor Scott, board members. When we first heard about the prerequisite issue, we were very careful to support this prerequisite issue, only because that we felt that it could create an unfair disadvantage to our EOPS students. After discussing this with you and learning, talking with Jane Patton and learning, expressing our concerns, and they took very careful consideration on a lot of our thoughts, and we thank you for that. As this gives local control, we can live by this, and we really think that because of the local control, we think it could work on many campuses, and of course it won't work on some campuses, and I think that's where we need to make sure that we're vocal at our board meetings and in our academic senates as well. The EOPS Association is in support of this item, as long as it doesn't unfairly create differences between the haves and the have-nots. As we at EOPS, we are always there to level that playing field. And we also agree with the pilot program, and we will be watching, and we want you to watch this too. So I mean, I hope that you all take a close look at what happens in the future, especially with these budget crisis and the Student Success Task Force, because we do need EOPS programs like EOPS that was cut 45% to support things like this and the student success. With EOPS, there is student success. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor made by Member Price, seconded by Member Azumi. We have other board member comment, Vice President Paris and Member McDonald.
First of all, I just want to thank everybody for participating in this very important and meaningful discussion. And I think there's no question of two things as we continue to have this dialogue, is that prerequisites are critical to student success, and that secondly, everybody is concerned about the success of our students, and that's why we're having this dialogue in the first place. When I think about the community college system, the one thing that I hear most criticized is that our strength is also our weakness, and that is the inconsistency in the application across our 112 colleges. And from a student success perspective, that does not set up our students to be successful when they can't ensure that one experience is going to be the same as another experience at each campus that they attend. I have been fortunate, or maybe not so fortunate, to be contacted by several people. Unfortunately, I can't share their direct comments. I've been contacted by faculty. I've been contacted by CEOs. I've been contacted by trustees and students alike that are in opposition of this. The faculty, the CEOs, and the trustees, I told them, why don't they come forward and speak to this in a public setting? For the faculty and the CEOs, it was particularly because of peer pressure and also the feeling that it could be career suicide, that they would not come forward with those comments, but they wanted to let me know that they did feel this timing is not the right time to implement it, because there's services that are needed to ensure the success of prerequisites. And if you recall at our very first discussion, several of my board members that are faculty members commented at that time, we need to ensure that with prerequisites, we have the supporting services. We have the counseling services as well as having the basic skills. When I look at the outline, the way it's written, it states that courses should be reasonably available. That does not mean that there's sufficient courses to meet the demand of students. And I think in the great world that we'd love to live in, we'd all love to believe that our students can take the courses in the way that we want them to take it, but the reality is it doesn't happen that way. I have nieces in the Bay Area. I've talked to them and their friends. I have my own children in this area here. I've talked to them and their friends. The reality is they take the classes as they can get them because of the current situation that we live in. The other side to that is the counseling services. There are a lot of students that self-counsel, and it's not because they don't want to utilize a counselor. It's because the counselors are over-inundated, and in many cases, those services have been cut. So there's not sufficient services out there to help support our students today. And so when we look at this framework and we look at true student success, one doesn't exist without the other. And there was a comment made about the pathway to success, and the pathway to success is not one single path. There's many things that interject into that success model. The other thing that I do want to comment on is that in the language here, it states that data would be required. However, it says it would not be required if at least 6 different districts have previously satisfied the collection requirements. I don't understand how that could be applicable when everyone's going to implement this on an individualized basis. And every campus, as we've stated over and over again, is unique in their own right. So how can we use a collective amount of data to determine what's correct at that individual local site? I am supportive of prerequisites. However, in this current climate, with our current situation where we heard today, we're up against $400 million in additional cuts. Potentially, if the ballot measure doesn't pass, it could be $960 million additional cuts. LAO is talking about putting forward a recommendation to cut additional basic skills from our students. I don't see how this is truly about student success. I totally respect faculty. I look to them to be the experts. I look to them to tell us what is right. And I believe in the prerequisites. However, I don't feel aligned with the services and support that are needed. We don't have the infrastructure to ensure our students are successful. Personally, I would be favorable of a pilot, because I think that allows us to address the comments and concerns of many of the people that have come forward. I don't think anybody is saying, at least from the comments that I've gathered, that they don't believe prerequisites are not necessary. I believe what the underlying issue is that they don't believe sufficient services are there to support our students, and that also the underserved students are going to be the ones that impact. And nobody can argue that. We know that those are facts. So for myself, I would appeal to my fellow board members to look at a pilot opposed to doing this across the board, because to me, it's not about win or lose, it's about compromise. And a pilot would be a compromise.
Member McDonald.
Member Perez hit the comments that I wanted to make.
Okay. There is a motion on the floor. Any other board members wishing to comment? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. 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 Opposed?
No.
Okay, motion.
I abstain.
Abstain?
Hands.
Yeah, same here.
Go ahead. What, do we need to call the roll?
Needs to get it down.
Okay.
Maybe a roll call.
Roll call would be fine. And Jerry?
Aye.
Isabel Barrera. Abstain.
Jeffrey Harvard Davis Lyman,
Yes.
Anita Haley,
Yes?
Scott Himmelstein,
Yes.
Lance Zuni,
Yes.
Deborah Madudan,
Yes.
Robert McDonald,
No.
Alice Perez,
No.
Michelle Price,
Yes.
Gary Reed,
No.
I'm sorry,
No.
Hannah Thomas,
Yes.
8 yeses, 3 noes, and 1 abstention.
Motion carries. Okay, we're going to take a lunch break now and return when, and Jerry? What-
1 o'clock, I guess?
One, no. 1:50, how about 1:15? 1:15. Maybe 1:20 even.